there's so much waiting for us just on the other side of that fear, right? It's like fear can hold us back from just like this, there's an infinite amount of
Mhm.
things. And if you just push yourself a little bit like outside of that comfort zone, it's okay to be scared. Like you just do it scared. It's fine. You don't wait to not be afraid of the thing. Just do it
Mhm.
scared.
Welcome to the Unreasonable Life podcast. This is where we get to redefine what's possible and inspire you to create a life that is extraordinary. I'm Dr. Nona Javid, an entrepreneur and author, quantum leap teacher, and founder of Elevate Club and 1 Week a Month Mastermind, a professional life liver, and your guide to living boldly. Every episode, I'll sit down with an incredible guest who has shattered limits, pursued their biggest dreams, and created lives that others have called impossible. Together, we're going to uncover the stories, the strategies, the lessons that will empower you to live your version of that unreasonable dream life. Because the life that you want isn't unreachable. It just happens to be unreasonable. Let's dive in. Leah, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on here last minute. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. I'm looking forward to hanging out for a bit.
I wanted to get us started by just I know a bit about your story. You've gone through 2 divorces. You've gone through so much transformation in a period of time. And I know just big picture, I know what it takes to go through some of the things that you've gone through. 1, because I've personally gone through them. And 2, because they're so massive. They're big quantum leaps that you have had either recognition internally and or you must have taken massive action to get to where you are now and do what you do now.
Yeah.
So I want to start by maybe taking you back to something in your life where you had to do something outside the box, or you made a decision to act outside of your normal identity, or what I call is make an unreasonable decision to shift things.
Immediately, when you ask that, it just brings me to my second divorce. After my second divorce, that's when I just knew I had to do something different. I didn't even know at that time really what that was or what that looked like, but I knew the results I was getting sucked and I needed to get different results. And so I just started diving into more of a spiritual journey, more of a self-awareness journey. I had just kind of stumbled upon the concept of self-awareness at that time and just figuring out what that even was. And I heard people talking about it, but like what does that actually mean? And how can I do that and get that? And so just kind of, personal development books and podcasts. And I started journaling and I did do a little bit of therapy at that time. I've been in therapy at many different times in my life, but as my second marriage was crumbling, I was also in therapy and she was encouraging me to journal. And that's when I also really started getting into mindfulness and meditation and just learning about that whole world and starting to dabble in like guided meditations and things like that and watching YouTube videos about it and learning more about it. And those little things, just doing things that I wasn't familiar with and learning about these things that I had heard of and starting like applying them in my life is really those little changes is what ended up giving me massive changes overall in my life and totally transformed who I am as a person and how I interact with everyone in my life and the results that I'm getting in my life.
Totally. And it is about, I like what you're saying, which I hope everyone's taking notes on, because it's like the little things that you do consistently end up changing your life. I do want to go back to see, was there like a moment where I know you were like, okay, after my second divorce, I'm like, there's something of like, I'm the common denominator. I'm getting myself into these situations. But did you have a moment, or was it a series of time or a phase of your life? And tell me about what that felt like in those moments prior to you thinking, okay, like, because I know for me, I've had to go down the rabbit hole, and I shared some pieces of my story with you and Sam the other day on like I had to go super just so low where there was no other possibility. It's almost like I have no choice but doing things differently. And it was this moment in the closet which I shared with you the other
Mhm.
day. But did you have either a moment like that, or a phase of time, or a series of moments where you're like, yeah, I got to do something different?
Yeah, I'm sure there were multiple moments, but one that comes to mind is kind of similar to your story in the closet. I remember being in my
Mm,
bedroom and just kind of realizing what was about to happen, wrapping my head around the concept of a second divorce at 36
mhm,
years old, fell to my knees sobbing just by myself in my bedroom because I knew that that's what was going to have to happen, and I was so pissed about it and so embarrassed and ashamed about it at that time and in those moments. Like, what is wrong with
mhm,
me? Like, why does this keep happening? Why do I keep finding myself in this situation? I have to, tear everything down and rebuild it all over again after I just did it all, already. And so I remember that feeling like a really pivotal moment, like, where I hit a
mhm,
low, a real low, and knew, "Okay, I'm about to enter a whole new phase of my life, and it's gonna be really hard, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I know that I really don't have another
mhm.
choice."
And prior to those moments, you hadn't tapped into all this self-awareness, the meditation, all the things that you started to.
No, I mean, I, like, heard people talking about it and maybe entertained the idea, but no, I wasn't applying it. I wasn't really learning about it and making it a part of
Mhm.
my day to day.
Yeah. I remember when I started to tap into, say, the universal truths, the quantum physics and things like that, there was a lot of resistance at the beginning. Like from where I was sitting, which was these things are not working for me. I got to do things differently.
Yeah.
At the same time, all these things that quote unquote I wanted to tap into and learn, they seemed so out there, and I was almost in denying them or feeling like that's a little woo woo. Like I don't know, and
Yeah.
it wasn't a match for who I was then, because who I was then was like, I'm a neuroscientist. I've studied like who am I to get into all this woo woo meditation, manifestation stuff? It's almost like I was resisting that part of myself. Did you ever experience anything like that, or did you just dive right into it?
Honestly, I think I've always kind of loved the woo-woo stuff. Like, even as a teenager, like, I remember going and getting my first psychic reading on Venice Beach at, like, 14, right? And I've been to mediums and so I've kind of always, been curious about different things like that and spirituality and just different all kinds of
Mhm.
stuff. But I didn't really apply it to my own
Mm,
life, if that makes
yeah.
sense. Like, I knew it existed and I was, like, curious about it, and I would listen to people, who talked about it, but I didn't know how to make it a part of something that I was doing on a regular
Yeah.
basis. And I feel like some of that resistance, it did come a little bit, but in maybe a little different way. I think just because I didn't have people in my life who were kind of into
Mm,
that stuff or having conversations about that stuff. So even if I was curious about it, I certainly wasn't going to be like bringing it up at dinner, like talking, because then people would look at me like I'm nuts. So I think that that was also part of it. Is like the more I just started getting into it and practicing different things, the universe just ended up connecting me with other people who also were on that kind of
yeah.
same frequency, and so now I can have conversations about it, and they don't look at me like
I
I'm
know.
nuts, you
We
know?
can talk about quantum leaps and manifestations all day.
Yeah.
And
Right,
that's what
right,
I was
right.
actually gonna say, like, right before you said that, I feel like I was also underneath it all into the woo. Since I was a child, like 12 years old, I read my first book around like that was on it's called Creative Visualization. Back then I lived in Iran and it was in Farsi. So I read that book. My dad was like, "You read that cover to cover at like 12 years old, and all of a sudden you start to act differently, you were talking differently." I don't have a recollection of it, but I was into that stuff. It's one thing to there's two things here that you kind of brought up. One is it's one thing to embrace the things that you know there's truth to them. It's a whole nother story, which I think both you and I have tapped into, is to share them with other people as a
Yeah.
way of helping and supporting others who are going through the same thing. And then the other piece to the equation is as you embrace them and as you take them on, then you start, like you said, you start to manifest and attract the people that are having those conversations and they're kind of on the same vibe, if you would.
Yeah, which is so
It's so
awesome. I mean,
awesome.
it's so
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
And I think you've done the same thing, like with the community that I've created at Elevate Club. Part of the reason I started that was like I use these words all the time that I want more people like Leah and everybody else that, for example, is in my community. Like they're not weirded out by I go to a
Right,
dinner
right.
party, a cocktail party, and I'm talking the way I'm talking to you, or I'm talking the way I'm talking to inside of my Elevate Club. I definitely do not belong. So part of why creating the community, and I know you're helping women in this realm as well, was to be able to have that for myself. It was really a two-way street too.
Yeah, 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 that's so true.
So, okay, so now you are taking on these this new information, not really new information you tapped into before, but you dive deeper because it's one thing to go, oh, these are I teach the 4 steps of quantum leap. These are the 4 steps of quantum leaps. Everybody knows them. Everybody knows how to lose weight. Everybody knows how to be in shape. Everybody knows how to make money, but they don't actually get into it. So, and I've had experiences like that. I know the steps or I've heard the things and meditation is cool and I should do it, but not until I'm in a place where I really need to utilize those things. So you dive into those things and then what happens?
Then I think things got a little ugly at first because I had to really look at some parts of myself that I didn't want
Yeah.
to see. And so that's rough. Some people call that shadow work or whatever you want to call it. That's when I really started to process and embrace and accept that I was walking around with really deep abandonment
Mhm.
issues. And that was why I was making the choices I was making in relationships. I was afraid of being
Mhm.
alone. And when I really looked at that, then I knew that, my only option then was to figure out how to be alone. Like, if I want different results, I have to do things differently. And so I started really stepping outside my comfort zone and like doing scary things. Like, I had to get a new job and then I found a townhouse that I could rent, really small, ugly little thing, but it was in my budget and it was in my daughter's school district. And so I was able to support her and myself on my own, and I spent a lot of time just alone, like by
Mhm.
myself, and then the more I did it and the more I learned and the more I forgave myself
Mhm.
for all of my decisions and mistakes and just doing the best I could with what I knew at the time, and forgiving myself for first for everything that I was kind of beating myself up for, I was slowly able to start just gaining self-acceptance, just accepting all of the pieces of me, like the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, the light, the dark, just accepting who I was and learning that it was enough, just the way it
Mhm.
was. Like I didn't have to, change anything to be worthy of like the things that I wanted or needed. And then my self-esteem started building and my confidence started building. And then it snowballs from there. And then when those things start happening, then you start making completely different
Mhm.
choices for yourself in your life and having new boundaries and having different relationships and cutting some relationships off because you realize those aren't good for you anymore, and self-worth and self-respect and all that stuff started to kind of snowball. So at first it's like, oh, like I'm looking at these things I don't want to see, but you kind of start peeling back, those pieces of the onion and doing, digging in and doing the hard work. And then it kind of loses its power and you start seeing things from a different perspective. And then it leads to then those other really great things like self-love, self-respect, boundaries, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and which totally
Mhm.
changes your life.
Mhm. Yeah. Can you share, because I think this is something everyone relates to, and your story is so deep and personal on like specific to you, why you experienced abandonment issues. I know that you and I had a conversation about it, and I think that a lot of people, they may not have had your particular situation, but some version of feeling like you're not going to be loved, right? That's ultimately the truth. You're going to be left. You're going to be abandoned. You're not going to be loved.
Yeah.
You're not enough. Some version of that. And then it sounds like you were even in therapy, like, prior to this, like, in your maybe in your previous
Hmm.
marriage or whatever. What was the difference now looking back at the shadow work? So one, maybe share what was the root of the abandonment, and then two, like, what was the difference
Hmm.
for you before going to therapy? Because you knew the trauma that you experienced, you knew that it was traumatic, but now you're looking at it differently, I would assume, or was there a different
Hmm.
perspective, or was it just more grand, or you were connecting the dot? How is it different now?
Yeah. So, well, I think it was for different reasons that I was in therapy
Mhm.
too. So there was different things that I was focusing on. So, but the abandonment, I essentially was abandoned multiple
Yeah.
times. So when I was 16 years old, I was living with my mom. We were living in an apartment together, and she actually at 41 years old, she had an asthma attack in her bedroom and died.
Mm.
Yeah, so I was, 16, my mom is gone, and I'm an only child.
You were
So
around
then I
sorry
had
to
to.
interrupt. Were you around when this
Sure.
happened? You were
Yes.
around.
Yes. I was there I watched the whole
Wow.
thing. It was horrific. It was completely traumatized.
Mhm.
And then my family kinda went, crazy, and I ended up going to stay with some relatives, and that ended up being a toxic environment, and so they kicked me out of the house and didn't speak to me for 12 years, so that was abandonment. And then 5 years after my mom died, my dad died of pancreatic cancer, and he was 46 years old. So by 21 years old now, it's just me alone in the world. The relatives I had aren't talking to me. My mom's gone, my dad's gone. I have no siblings, so it's just me, like, left to pick up the
Mhm.
pieces and figure things out. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what was going on in me and how to deal with it, how to cope. I had no skills or tools. I didn't even know that I was
Right.
traumatized. I just knew, yeah, my mom died and it was hard, but I didn't know really what had happened to me in that experience. So my coping mechanism became serial monogamy, because if I wasn't in a relationship, I literally felt like I was just like floating around on this planet, just alone and lost. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know anything. I mean, I was just lost. And so at least being a part of something, being in a relationship made me feel tethered to something. I was just so desperate for
Yeah.
love, for someone to have appreciation and affection towards me, because if I wasn't in a relationship, I didn't know how to get that. I didn't know how to give that to myself, and there was no one else. So I did that over and over and over for years and was constantly choosing the wrong partners because it was really just I was coming from this place of
Yeah.
lack. I was trying to fill voids with those external
Mhm.
sources. And so it took me until 2 divorces
Mhm.
later to go, "Okay, like, why am I doing this?" And that's what led me down the path of realizing, "Oh, this started many, many years ago. Abandonment issues. I'm trying to fill voids. And that's why I knew I had to do all that hard inner
Mhm.
work of, like, just figuring out how to love myself and fulfill myself and not rely on a relationship to make me feel happy or complete or worthy or loved or enough. And so, yes, I did start therapy at multiple times in my life. The first time I was in therapy, I was like 18 because I decided myself that I should probably talk to someone about the fact that my mom died in front of me, and because no adults in my life at the time made any of those
Mhm.
suggestions. So I think, over the years I was going because I knew I was having a hard time dealing with it, and so I was kind of talking more about the trauma and the loss. And it wasn't until later in life and I started going through more relationships, that was when I realized maybe that needs to be the center of the conversation so that I can figure out why I keep doing this in my life as well. And then that's when I started to kind of trickle into some of that other, self-awareness
Yeah.
and all that
And
good
I think
stuff.
that's very organic too. Like when we are in our 20s and even in our 30s, for me, things didn't start to make sense, or I didn't start to put the dots together. I mean, my relationship with my mom has always been toxic, but I didn't even see her as the toxic individual in my life until I think I was in my maybe early 30s when I started to see
Mhm.
all the little pieces of toxicity that were showing up. So I think it's a natural progression as we age. At the beginning, it makes sense. You're like, I've lost my mom, so I'm gonna talk to somebody about the incident itself. So it's so much at a surface level, if you would. But then later, as we get into relationships and we start a job or a business or something, then we're like, wait a second, this trauma,
Yeah.
this experience that I had as a child is actually showing up in every aspect of my life. It wasn't just a trauma, an isolated situation that I have to get over or have to
Yeah.
process. It's more like, how did that get integrated into all of these different pieces? I don't know if you
Yeah.
believe this, and I don't even know if I believe this, but I do believe this, that our soul comes into, the physical world to experience certain things. And I think I
Yes.
shared this with you in one of the conversations we had about my brother passing away. I had my mom, actually, she had multiple miscarriages between me and my sister. We're 7 years apart, 6.5 years apart. There was even a little boy that was born healthy and was like basically passed away in the hospital due to medical complications. So basically there was a mistake in the hospital that he passed away. So that
Mhm.
incident of trauma was like isolated, and I always knew that that was something happened. I was 2.5 when it happened, but I didn't really put two and two together on how my soul came into this reality to experience that loss, watch my parents go through the trauma and the grief. Like I have memories of my mom all of a sudden crying. I can't even imagine now being a mom
Mhm.
losing a fresh baby who is healthy also.
Right.
And so now I can look back and go, oh, that is when the seed was planted, or the story was planted, or the identity took form of me becoming the helper to help, right? Or I
Mhm.
have a friend I often talk to about like how certain things that happened in her childhood, they created this theme that kept happening in her life. Like for me, I am faced with, whether it's my ex partner, whether it's my clients, whether it's the kind of work that I do, or people in my life, constantly faced with people that want help. Why? Because I came
Mhm.
here to help in a certain particular way, right? And in your case,
Yeah.
it almost sounds like, I hope I'm not like giving you a whole story, but it almost sounds like you came into this world and you had abandonment one, like could not be any more of a picture of a feeling of an abandonment than your mom passing away when you're young. So your mom passes away, your dad crosses over. Then you've got probably the family members that you described. Then who knows? Then that pattern is going to show up in all the different relationships until you have the moment where it's like, no, 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 it's gonna be different.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go from abandonment into freedom. So it's like your soul comes in, it has to experience so many different things with regards to
Yeah.
abandonment just to realize that you are connected.
Mhm.
And I know for me, I went from having to take the responsibility of fixing people, including my ex-husband, and then realizing I don't have to fix anybody. I do not have to carry the burden of fixing people, but I didn't recognize that until
Yeah.
later in life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that too, and yeah, and I am a believer that also everything happens for a
Mhm.
reason. I do believe that, and I know sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow if you're not in the mindset to really look at it that way. But I know now all of my pain. I mean, everything that I've experienced in the trauma and all of the loss, and it it was meant to happen. I mean, it was meant to lead me to where I am today. And now, because of all of those things, I am able to help thousands of
Mhm.
people. And I wouldn't change it. I'm so grateful. Now I'm in the place of I can look back at all of that trauma and pain and sadness and loss, and I feel gratitude
Yeah.
for it. And that took a lot of fucking
Mhm.
work to get to that place, but that's where I am now because I know that I never would be living this life if it weren't for all of those dominoes that had to fall first.
Yes, the contrast is so
Yeah.
important. Is to be in relationships or to experience things that are so out of alignment, so painful, they bring you to so much despair that then you realize that's not what I want, and I want the contrast of this because otherwise you really don't know. You wouldn't have known
Yeah.
connection if you didn't experience abandonment, connection to yourself and
Right.
connection to your partner. So then you alchemize all of this pain and you get into the things you get into and you alchemize it. And somehow, fast forward, you're helping all these women and people in general with the pain that they are going through. And I want to know was there a moment where, or series of moments where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Was it when you met somebody? Was it you just start? How did it all
Yeah.
start?
Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the pandemic. It was in lockdown
Mhm,
2020. So I had been sent home from my job with a laptop to like work from home because every no one could leave the house. So then I was also homeschooling my daughter, just living alone, doing that, working, doing all the things by myself as a single mom. And I knew that I always knew that I was meant for more. I just all my life had these jobs that just didn't mean anything to me. I could be successful in them and I could make money and but I just didn't care about the thing that I was doing. It wasn't fulfilling
mhm,
at all. And I always was on the hunt to find the thing that I was meant to do, that I was good at and also felt good and was fulfilling. And I started to learn about life coaching during lockdown. I was like reading about it. And the more I read, I mean, it literally was just like a light went off in the part, the clouds parted and I heard the angels singing. Like I was like, oh my God, like this is the thing, that I'm like, I would do this for free. Like I love
yeah,
this, what all of these things that this is. So I decided to take some like online courses and get some certifications and just started to just I wanted to start my own business. I just decided to do it. And so for a while, for the first couple years, it was really just kind of a side hustle as a single mom, like, trying to make ends meet, but I knew it was something I was so passionate about. And when I started to figure out as I was putting my business together, like who it was I wanted to help, I knew I wanted to help women. And I knew I had a lot of information from the 2 divorces I had gone
mhm,
through and that I wish I had when I was going through it. That I had so much information for them and even just in sharing my own story and all my
mhm,
mistakes to help them avoid making some of the same mistakes. And because I had already done that work to cultivate self-awareness, I understood why I was making the decisions I was making and which helped me see so clearly other women doing the same
mhm,
thing. And so I can kind of help guide them and, nurture them in those moments to help them, avoid some of those missteps and give them the tools and the resources that would help them figure things out way
mhm,
faster than me, and hopefully save them from a second divorce,
mhm.
hopefully help them only get through one and not have to go through a second one. So that's kind of how that, manifested into what I do
Yeah, I
today.
love that. And I feel like it's anytime I meet someone who's authentically doing the thing that they came here for, there is a story behind it. This is what I went through. And then I realized I could help other people who've gone through the same thing and help them collapse time and help them be able to not make the same mistakes or do it faster or do it with less pain.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that becomes the thing that they do, right? And
Yes. So
mhm.
true.
So, would you say that that jump from and I don't know what you were doing prior, like during the pandemic, you said this is something that you started, and I know you had other jobs. I don't know if you were on corporate or what you were doing prior, but would you say that that jump as the side hustle, or maybe a different jump? What's the most unreasonable decision, action that you have taken, or maybe the most unreasonable thing that you have experienced in life? Was it that jump or was it something different?
Like, as a good thing? I
Yeah,
mean, like a
like
good decision?
good unreasonable decision.
Yeah,
Usually
that. I
it's like,
mean,
"What are
but
you doing, Leah? What are you doing trying to coach like, become a life coach now?
yeah,
Maybe you were so great at this other thing, you're making so much money." Was it that jump
yeah.
that was an
It was definitely the business because people don't get that. So many people won't get that, right? They're going to be like, what do you mean like life code? Like, what is that? Like,
Yeah.
who are you? And then of course, like people project their own fears and insecurities onto you. And because they would never do something like that, they're telling you like, oh my God, are you really going to try to? And and a lesson that I've learned just as I get older is I keep so much private now. Like I even to people I'm close to, I really don't share a lot because I don't want my vision tainted by their shit. Like I know you love me and it's fine, but like I need to keep my manifestations to myself until it's done and then I'll talk to you all about it. You know what I mean? So but yes, there were people who like didn't get it, but I believed in myself. I mean, I really did. I knew like I was passionate about this. I loved it. I was something I was naturally
Mhm.
good at, and I think that came from all of the things that I've been through. And just I moved so many times. So I've moved so many times, and I was always a new girl in school. So I just have all these skills. I'm good at with people. Like I like people. I like talking to them, and I kind of put all that together. And I knew that I could make it happen if I just believed in myself, but it was scary as hell, like, to jump, and then especially when you're, like, transitioning to, like, jump into that full time. I mean, I'm like, I really had to invest in myself, but I just trusted, and this is where all the woo-woo shit comes back and, like, spirituality and manifestation. I had to just let go of trying to control it all and just trust that this was my path. Just I had to trust that this was what I was meant to do and it was going to happen, and I had to let go of the time frame, like how long it was going to take or any of
Mhm.
that. Trusted that I would be connected with the right people, trusted that I would align with the right clients. I had to just have so much blind faith in the universe and in myself and just keep focusing on that without letting all of those fears and insecurities play too big of a
Yeah,
role.
totally. And that is the unreasonable thing. Like you did what was unreasonable. It would have been unreasonable for you to make the jump and become a life coach in that moment or take your business full time. I mean, sometimes I feel like the level of delusion that it takes to
Yeah,
like,
right.
launch a
Right.
business without any proof, especially if you're starting over. It's not like you're buying a business, you're looking at the numbers, you're like, it's worked. So this is making money. All I have to do is get in
Yeah.
here, do the same thing, or maybe improve it. But no, when you're launching something, when you are, I mean, I remember even like going from the identity of like the chiropractor, because I was in practice for a while, and then I went into the identity of a coach. It's like I have zero like nobody knows me as a coach. As a matter of fact, when I went out there and I was like, I'm a coach, people were like, you must have had a really bad business, or like, you must have broken your back. You must have.
Right.
And it was quite the opposite. It was like, no, I mean, sometimes, and you say to protect your space, which is a really good message here too, is don't share those things. But I
Yeah.
almost feel like for me at points it was impossible not to share because it's part of my business, right? So I'm going out there on social
Mhm.
media and then telling people,
Yeah.
and even that I could feel the unsaid judgment.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there was always that piece to the equation too, but those jumps from the
Yeah.
different identities were so scary every single time. I mean, I recently, just earlier this past year, I moved into a new house and this is my dream home. It is way outside of my comfort zone in terms of budget, neighborhood, the
Mhm.
people that I have surrounded myself with. And it was
Mhm.
scary financially. It was scary to like I just felt completely out of place in the area too.
Mhm.
But I remember one of my friends just being like, sometimes you gotta jump. Sometimes you gotta
Yeah.
jump
It's
and
true.
then let the pieces fall where they need to fall. And then you pick some up
It's
and you
so
let
true.
go of some and then you settle. New
Yeah.
space,
Yeah,
energy.
there's so much waiting for us just on the other side of that fear, right? It's like fear can hold us back from just just like this, there's an infinite amount of
Mhm.
things. And if you just push yourself a little bit like outside of that comfort zone, it's okay to be scared. Like you just do it scared. It's fine. You don't wait to not be afraid of the thing. Just do it
Mhm.
scared, and trust that everything's going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to. And when you do that, it's just like the whole world can open up for you. And there's so many things that can happen. Amazing things.
So many things, yeah. And one of the things I always think about when I'm about to make that jump or when I am making that jump and I'm super scared is I tell myself that I have more trust in the version of me who's already jumped. Like she can figure it out. I'm just going to jump. She will figure out the
Yeah.
details of it. My job right now is to just make that quantum leap. But you're so right. On the other side of fear, on the other side of jump is there's just so many opportunities that are available to us. So, do you have like a really cool story of maybe one of your clients or one of your students who has had just crazy outside the box results with the work that she has done with you? Like something.
Yeah, I do. There was a client who came to me actually pretty early into my business, maybe within like the first year or
Mhm.
so. We did a lot of sessions together. She kind of kept coming back and kept coming back. And she was somebody who was a little later in life, a little like mid to late
Mhm.
50s. Kids were grown and about to be out of the house. And she was in a relationship where she just wasn't happy. It wasn't necessarily he wasn't a horrible person, nothing terrible was happening, but she just knew that she felt stuck and she didn't want to be stuck
Mhm.
anymore. So she wound up getting a divorce and kind of helped her through that early process of it, all of the guilt and the shame and the all of those things, low self-esteem and overwhelm and everything, and worked through it. And so fast forward till today, we're actually still in touch. We're like Facebook friends now. I've been in touch with her for a while. Fast forward to today, she is now a coach. She is actually a women's empowerment coach, and she now has her own business that she specializes in helping midlife women make that jump, like helping them through that decision of should I stay, should I
Mhm.
go? And like if you do want to go, why it's okay, and let me help you
Mhm.
through it. So yeah, she kind of went through a whole thing. And so I love that for her. She's
Yeah.
amazing.
Only if we could zoom out and see like the moment that of pain that you are describing, or I was describing my moment in the closet, your moment in your bed where in your bedroom where you're like, this is really painful. I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed of all the things. Only if we could zoom out and see what the future holds. Like
Yeah, wouldn't that would make things a lot easier.
things a lot easier.
That's where that blind faith comes in. You have to just trust that even though you can't see how things are going to work out, just trust that it will and that it will all fall into
Not
place.
only in your own life, but also look at what you are doing for other women. Like this woman has created a whole business because she went through what you were doing originally because you made the jump and then she made the jump and God, there's so many
Yeah.
differences, right? Like
Yes, like those little waves, right? The
ripple,
little waves in the water, they just go,
so
yeah.
beautiful.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, well anything else you want to share or something we didn't touch on?
I just think, anybody who's listening, just don't underestimate the power of self-awareness and just really investing in yourself. I wish somebody told me that many, many years ago. And just you have to prioritize yourself. It's not woo-woo. It's something that is so important and will give you such amazing results in your life. Just take that time. Take the time to invest in yourself, whatever that looks like for
Mhm.
you, and keep pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone because that really is where the magic happens. Even though it sounds cliche, it's the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great message to end this episode with. I would love people to get in touch with you. I know I'm personally connected to you on Instagram and you put out some great content on there. Is that a good place? You want people how
Yeah, any of the socials. I'm everywhere: YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. My handle is at mindfully ready. So you can find me
I
there.
love that. Awesome. Thank you, Leah, for giving us all this time. And it was lovely chatting with you and getting to know your journey too. And thanks, everybody, for listening in. Tune in for the next episode on the Unreasonable Life podcast. Thank you for tuning into the Unreasonable Life podcast. I hope that today's episode has inspired you to dream bigger, act bolder, and step into your own version of an unreasonable dream life. If you loved what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who's ready to take their next bold leap. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram and share your biggest takeaways from today's episode. And remember, the life that you want isn't unreachable. It's just unreasonable. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Unreasonable Life podcast.